Welcome and good afternoon. Thank you for joining in to Let's Talk Personal. I am your host, Frances Reimers, and it's so lovely to see you. I have literally just gotten off the train from New York City, and it's wonderful to be back in the District of Columbia and driving my own car rather than walking or taking the subway everywhere. And so I'm so happy to be here with you this afternoon. If you would like to join in today's conversation, you can do so on Twitter at LTP Brand Radio and on Instagram at Let's Talk Personal. If you'd like to talk personally to me, you can do so on Instagram at Firestarter CEO and on Twitter at Your Firestarter. Per usual, I like to kick off the show with some information. First of all, I'd like to wish a happy early birthday to everyone's favorite Let's Talk Personal fan, my dad, whose birthday is tomorrow. So happy early birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yay! And the next thing is my other favorite thing to do is give feedback to fan email. Yesterday, I got a fantastic email from someone asking if the radio show is all I do or if I actually have a job. And yes, I do actually have a job. I am the founder of Firestarter. Look it up, www.yourfirestarter.com. I'm building brands, hence why the show is about brands. So yes, thank you for asking if I have a day job. But speaking of jobs, we have this job to do and talk about your job. And I'm so excited for today's guest. If you did not read the headline for tonight's show, today's guest, DJ Johnson, is a longtime friend, former colleague. And before the show got started, we were trying to a jam session of getting caught up on like 5 years worth of information that we had to share. But welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here, and I know probably half of the DC Association world is watching today because we're just cool and they want to watch us.
We are, and now people are able to see, as we were talking about before, the trajectory of when we were just, kind of managers at a, nonprofits,
Yes.
and then now we're both kind of, leading the revolution.
Yes,
so,
we are leading the
yes.
revolution. And so you'll hear all about the, if viewers of the show have not yet guessed, most of my guests are people that I have known a very, very, very long time because I know very, very cool people. And I like to bring them on because they have a great, amazing stories. And you, my dear, are no exception. You actually started out your career in journalism.
That's right.
And it made its way over to predominantly the association world. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Sure. Well, growing up, my family moved around a lot. And so 3 things about myself that I really noticed is that I'm very adaptable. I definitely have a lifelong desire to learn about things. And I really liked helping people. So that was one of the reasons why I first went into journalism, because I truly do believe in the principles of journalism to kind of educate people on issues that are impacting them and to make a huge difference. But as I got into the business side of journalism, as we've all seen, especially in recent times, there are issues with journalism that, I know that the profession is still trying to fix. And I wasn't really getting that sense of fulfillment.
Right.
I wasn't getting a chance to see what kind of positive impact that I was having on people. So while I was waiting on a program to get into grad school, I started temping with an association. Big shout out to the American Association of Diabetes Educators in Chicago. And that was my first association, and I loved it. I loved it because it continued to educate me on important issues that I didn't know about. I actually got to interact a lot with people and use my communication skills.
Right.
And also, I was working with organizations that, while making money and being profitable is important, and I want people to know that if you don't know much about nonprofits, nonprofits do not mean no money.
Right.
That's not what it means.
They shouldn't manage themselves that way either.
Right.
Right.
But the purpose, I wish people thought of them as like mission driven, or in some case cause organizations.
Right.
Because I really got that charge
Right.
that I was missing kind of from journalism, because I got that immediate feedback and that
Right.
immediate interaction to see the positive impact that I was having on people's lives.
Right. And so you left the Windy City and came to DC?
That's right.
And so where did the journey take you from there?
Sure. And so In Chicago, I'd actually been working for a primarily LGBT publication
Right.
called Pride. Now it's called Pink. And after working at my first association, a job came open at the National Lesbian and Gay Journalist Association. So now all of a sudden I had the opportunity where I'd worked in an association, but I had this past experience in terms of working for the gay press. And now I would be working for an organization that did both,
Right.
that would support people that were in the role that I used to be in.
Right.
And then also my family is an East Coast family.
Right.
They live in Richmond, so it brought me closer to home. But that was also one of the other great things where I was able to take something that was both a part of my history and something that I was really passionate about.
Right.
And it combined that. So I was working there for I think almost 3 years, and then I got a job with the Association of Associations.
That's the mothership.
That is, yeah, where we both worked. ASAE, the Center for Association Leadership.
Yes.
It was probably the most meta. It was the most meta job that I ever had.
It was, I would say that would be a fair assessment. Yeah, it was probably one of the most meta jobs I've had as well.
It's kind of like, doctors going to doctors. So
Yes.
you're managing and helping associations find best practices and what they
Yes.
can do to run their associations better. But at the same time, everyone that's coming to your meeting is telling you how they do it differently and asking, why aren't you doing it?
Or how they do it exactly the same, and they've done it exactly the same for the past 200 years.
Exactly. Yes, which I know we're going to talk a little bit more later.
Yes, we definitely are.
And after that, I went to work for an international medical association. That was my first international association. It was great getting to do meetings in Brussels and to see Hungary. But what wasn't so great is having a conference call at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
with India and then having a conference call at 9 p.m. in China and not realizing that they would be on the same day because you weren't paying attention to the time zones. So that was definitely a learning curve. And then after that, I came to work where I currently am at the American Society of Interior Designers, which is because there's a nonprofit for everything.
Everything, yes.
But, and what's been really interesting for me is I've always had a kind of a love of design, both the impact and the aesthetics, but I really had no clue all of the great work that interior designers do.
Right.
And the
Yes.
fact that what they do, it's not just about the aesthetic and the colors. It's about how can they look at your space to help you be more productive in the office, to help you be able to grow in place with a space so that as we all get older, there are certain things that you can do or have done in advance so that the place where you live is prepared for that.
Right.
Instead of this idea of you have to have a starter home and then you grow to another home, and then why not have something that's adaptable so that if
You can just stay there.
yeah, stay there
Right.
for your entire life and bring other people that are in other parts of their life cycle. So, and so hopefully one of the things that you can hear and see is that
Right.
at each association that I've been at, even though I might not have always had a background,
Right.
like I did with the gay journalist, I was able to find something that really excited me and
Right.
that ignited me,
Right.
and that, and also that a way that I could see where I was helping the world,
Right.
and where I was helping the members directly. And I think that is to be able to go to a job every day and to think I'm making a difference,
Yes.
and to hear and see the difference that you're making while still being able to meet your financial and professional goals. I mean, I think that's the American dream.
Right. It really is. And, I look back on my nonprofit and association careers as little mini chapters of my life. Every place I went was a mini chapter of my life. And even though I'm completely on the other side of the coin now, professionally, all of those bits and pieces of my nonprofit career, I think, are still benefiting me today
Sure.
on the for-profit side. The people I met, the things I learned, the places that I went, all of that was extremely beneficial to me as I made the transition over to the for-profit side. So it was a great journey, and it's a uniquely DC journey. Yes, you can do associations and nonprofits in other parts of the country, but that journey here in DC, I think, is very unique and special. And I think, just like people who work up on Capitol Hill have their kind of unique DC story, those of us in the DC association community, I think we have our own little niche and story that is uniquely DC.
Oh, I
think
definitely
so.
agree. Yeah, because DC is definitely the association capital. There are hubs in other parts of the country, Chicago, even the medical associations that you find, spread out in Indiana or
Yep.
even in Pennsylvania. But, and the other thing that I find really interesting about associations is I think that there is something very American
Yes.
about it.
Yes.
This thought that you're taking, it's really that we are better as a group, and we are better and can get more done and have more of an impact when we all come together and are united around something than kind of doing it individually. And I think that the nonprofit model is spreading to other countries.
Right.
And other countries have used the NGO or the non-governmental organizational model.
Right.
But you are seeing a lot more countries coming to America
Yeah.
trying to learn about the nonprofit model
Yep.
because they're seeing how it's uniting and igniting people here.
Right. And talking about uniting and igniting people here, you are heavily involved in ASAE's DELP program.
I am.
So talk a little bit. I'm sure most of the people watching, especially those outside the DC area, have no idea what that is. So talk a little bit about it and why it's so important that you're involved in it.
Sure. So DELP stands for a Diversity Executive Leadership Program.
Right.
And it's basically kind of a leadership and mentoring training program that's intended to get people who are members of underrepresented groups within association management to get to the CEO level, to also serve on the board of ASAE, and really in order to be more successful. Because like with a lot of professions, something about the nonprofit community is that the more you go to the top, so the CEOs, the people who are sitting in the C-suites or on the executive team, when you look at, in some ways, the demographics of this country, and you compare that, it starts to change the more you go up the ladder.
Right.
And so it starts to get, obviously very male, and it starts to get, very Caucasian. I mean, and that's not to count against the accomplishments of the people who have gotten there.
Right.
It takes a lot of time and work to get to that level, and people who have gotten there have earned it.
Right.
But, at the same time, sometimes, the networks that we have are what give people access.
Right.
And there is intentional access and sometimes institutional access.
Right.
And so what this program intends to do is really to both create a network and to give more opportunities for access for people who might not get it as much. So that could be racial minorities. There have been DELPs that have been differently abled, that have been like blind, deaf, and the point of it is number one, it gives us our own network.
Right. Yes.
Like, I mean, one of the things that's been amazing for me is I had gotten accepted in the program. I had applied, I think 3 times. So third time was the charm because it's very competitive.
Right.
And on the third, when I did get accepted, it was right when I had just gotten promoted to vice president at where I am now, ASID.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, I was having to go from being a high performer to someone that had to navigate all the intricacies of how do you deal with internal versus external politics?
Right.
How are you helping to build up a team to deal with change management in different situations? So all of a sudden, I had a cohort of people. We actually have Slack, which is a great app to use to be connecting with people. And we, like all the time when someone is interviewing for a new CEO job, and if they have a question about, has anyone heard of this organization or this particular person, or even just I'm going in for this interview and I know I got this, but I just need someone to pump me up.
Right.
We are on all hours of the night sending messages and sometimes reviewing people's elevator speeches. So for me, that has been like the biggest value. But then on top of that, we're getting professional development that we're getting to go to complimentary. We've been assigned an executive coach, a mentor, like all of these things that I think for anyone who's trying to get to the next level in their career, you don't need a program to do that. Right. You can do this for yourself.
Right.
But it is an amazing and supportive experience. And, in terms of branding, this is a program that it's sponsored by the Detroit Convention and Visitors Bureau, which I love the D.
Yeah.
For anyone who's never been to Detroit, you need to go.
That whole crew with Detroit Convention and Visitors Bureau is top notch.
It is.
They're great.
But at the same time, it has I have a loyalty now to ASAE into Detroit that I would not have had if I hadn't gone through this program.
Right. And so you touched very briefly on brand, and we were talking a little bit about this off camera before we started. You over the years have very much constructed a very careful brand. Well, whether it was intentional, not intentional, but you are now in this position as the VP of membership. You're the guy who has to have tough conversations and can have tough conversations with ease. That's a brand. So talk a little bit about how you have kind of led yourself down a brand path, because when people know you, and I can say this because I know you personally and professionally, there is a very distinct way that you are thought of, and it's very careful and it's very well put together. Was that planned? Is it accidental? Talk a little bit how you've constructed your brand over the years.
Sure. And I think it was definitely a little bit of both. One of the things about branding is it's really important that you find a way to tie it to who you are at your core. But I think everyone needs a narrative. Everyone needs that story of
I know that's right.
where they've come from, where they're going. And then that also, when you've got that narrative, even when there are bumps along the way, when you make mistakes, when you have missteps, it can still become a part of the narrative. And where I think people get tripped up is when something happens that just seems so outside of the narrative.
Right.
Like we were kind of talking before sometimes about people who they seem to be doing so well, and then you find out that they've got basically these secret lives, which are so far outside of their brand, and then they're no longer able to, kind of get those endorsement deals. And you lose it in an instant.
Right.
So, for me, we moved 6 times before I turned 13. And people always say, "Oh, was your dad in the military?" And I always make the joke. I say, "No, my dad was a diehard capitalist." I said he had 4 kids, and a wife, and he wanted to make sure that we could all be supported. And so, if he could get that promotion, even if we had to move, 2 states over, he would do that. And that was something that always stuck with me: his dedication to family, and also dedication to his career, but for the sake of accomplishing the greater good of making sure that we were all provided for. So I always thought about myself in terms of my brand as someone who had lived many different places, and as I said, that was adaptable. That was when I learned that I've got the gift of gab, and that basically I can get along with anyone. And I think that is because one of my core values is that we are all the way that we are for a reason. Because of things that have happened to us, things that we've seen, things that we've experienced. And even in some of the places that I lived, being the outsider, it helped me understand better, both to learn more about myself, but then also to see, so what would this be like for someone that maybe didn't have my exact experience, but other people who feel like outsiders too. So I think, so my brand, first going into associations was, here's the nice guy who can talk to anyone, who seems to be able to, he's a doer, he gets things done. And that's to be a worker bee or to be a workhorse, that's a great brand to have.
Yes.
But the issue with that is that if you are known as the workhorse, sometimes that's all people will ever see you
as.
Yes. And you kind of get pigeonholed into that role. So when it comes to, here's someone that could be a leader, but we really need them to keep the trains running on time. So why, we're not going to take a chance. Maybe we'll bring someone in from the outside. So I think as I started to realize that I wanted to do more in associations and to get to that next level, I did really consciously curate my brand. I did look at who were the people in my network that had achieved the kinds of things that I wanted to achieve. How could I work more closely with them? What were opportunities to gain more visibility? I applied for things like, I was the 2013 one of the 40 under 40 kind of association people to watch. And then that same year, I also got the young and aspiring, which was great because I was over 30 at the time, but I was still
whatever. You still look good.
Yeah, thank you, Noxzema. Which if Noxzema's looking for anyone to do an endorsement deal, I'm just saying,
look at this.
Yeah, look at the face.
it's like porcelain.
Thank you. But so I started intentionally curating my brand to be not just the nice guy, but also someone who could help organize change, someone who could get into difficult situations and hopefully find that reason about why people were reacting the way that they are, and to be a bridge builder. And I think also beyond that, like everything from my dress to my story that could bring my own flair to it. That I wasn't necessarily going to be, kind of a drone that comes in just to get things done, but hopefully I can do it in a way that makes people laugh and have fun, but also can help people kind of zero in on a common experience.
Right. I think one of the, having worked alongside of you was you definitely had your own flair, but your flair was not like, look at me.
Sure, not
It was
too
just
distracting.
kind of set yourself apart from the herd a little bit, whereas some people, when they're building their brand, they go so far of creating a look at me that it gets distracting.
And it's difficult, I think, to lead a team.
Right.
Because, I do think while it is important that we all learn how to have those humble brags,
Right.
the things that tell our narrative, that sell our brand, but at the same time, if I'm shining all the glory on myself, that doesn't recognize, the team members that are tirelessly working, either when I'm traveling or that are behind the scenes, a lot more in the weeds, in those workhorses that
Right.
I wouldn't be here today if it was not for the shoulders of the people that I'm standing on.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about family. When we're going to take a little bit of a break. When we get back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about your family and some current events. So hang tight. We'll be back in 1 second. Hi, and welcome back. We have been just chit-chatting away offline because, again, we're trying to catch up after a long period. But welcome back. Thank you for joining us. And if you'd like to join the conversation, we are actually Facebook Live, so you can join us that way. Or you can jump on Twitter at LTP Brand Radio or on Instagram at Let's Talk Personal. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about your family. You are not only part of a very large family, but you have your own family
That's right.
now. And this is very, very exciting. And I've gotten to watch this develop over the year. I remember when you were planning your wedding.
Yes.
I remember that. And so I've gotten to watch this blossoming love story from start to the present. And so you have always been, and one thing I've always admired about you, you have always been a very open and proud member of the gay community. And now you have a husband and now you have a son. Talk to me a little bit about how that has all played into your brand and why that's been so important that you've been open and very transparent about your entire journey.
Sure. And it's interesting because part of my, I guess, pedigree in terms of my career is, the fact that I worked at a, LGBT magazine.
Right.
So that was always, kind of on my resume. But ironically, in one of my first couple of association jobs, the person who managed me directly wasn't the most, I guess, kind of an inclusive person. And so this was someone who, I remember there was one time I was in a marketing meeting and we had two different versions of the brochure to think about.
Of course.
And one, it was a bunch of people who they all happened to be white.
Okay.
And then there was another one that was more of like that United Colors of Benetton.
Yeah.
Right. It was like the Power Rangers. Every race was somehow represented, kind of on there. So my manager at the time said, well, the second one over here on, the right, it looks nice, but that just doesn't represent our membership. Like it doesn't look like any of us. And so, DJ, back me up on this, like we shouldn't go for this one. And I mean, of course, I had my stats and figures prepared, that basically for people, especially under the age of 30, and we were trying to get that demographic,
right,
that it turns out that in terms of like race, in terms of the optics of a picture, it actually matters more that there is kind of diversity in the mix.
Yes.
Because of, the demographics of people's families and friend groups now.
Right.
And so, but suddenly I was in that meeting and I thought, okay, so I'm the only brown person in this room, and now I'm the one that has to either stand up for or that has to give people the justification. So, and so I had to kind of navigate that. And but that also sent a message. So in that job, I went by David instead of DJ.
Right.
I kept things that were about my family and my personal life very close to the vest.
Right.
Because I felt, well, I'm reading the signals here, and the signals that I'm hearing here are these things could be more of a liability.
Right.
And what was interesting was then having the flip experience of going to work at an organization that focused on the gay community, things where everyone was talking about their families and their partners or their husbands and wives, and where the day after Pride the office was closed, which I've never had a job like that since, but it was interesting at that job, and then especially going to work at ASAE, where I was pulling all of these different things from my history together, and it helped me realize that these differences, they're not a vulnerability.
Right.
They're things that give me a different perspective. And I went to a talk recently where the speaker, she gave this term or this kind of theory where she called it onlyness. So only and then ness. And what she described onlyness as is it's really easy for people to say, oh, well, I'm unique. We're all unique. But I mean, even if I were to list like my demographics, moving around a lot, being an out African-American gay man, you could still find other people like that.
Right, sure.
But when it comes to the experiences of where I've lived and exactly how that has impacted me and all this, all of a sudden, it's like I'm the only person standing on that pinnacle that can speak to that experience.
Right.
And trying to figure out, so what about that experience, what does that make me, give me strengths in terms of a way that I might approach something and be uniquely situated to be able to do better at it.
Right.
And then what are those things also where I would have to worry about either stereotyping or people underestimating, and then how do I either adjust my approach or how do I use that to my advantage? So in the beginning, when I first made this career shift, I thought, I'm not well known in this industry, so I got to play everything close. But then as I started to recognize, wait, I have skills, I have talent, hopefully I have things that I can really bring to an organization, and by hiding any part of myself, that I'm doing a detriment to both myself and another organization. But I think, just like you were saying before about, you can be showy and flashy, but if you get to the point where you are being a distraction, or where, because once again in associations, it's about the mission. It's about what we are trying to accomplish and the change we're trying to make in the world.
Right.
And so one of the things through my journey, I think that I learned was, by being able to walk into a room and say, this is my experience, and there might be things about my experience that you agree with. There
Right.
might be things that you disagree with,
Right.
and I'm okay with that.
Right.
But also at the same time, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to apologize, but I will recognize that there are going to be differences. That has made my brand stronger,
Right.
and I think that has just made me stronger as a leader and as
Right.
a person.
Were you ever concerned that at a time where there would be a backlash of you putting yourself out there in this way?
Sure. There were definitely anytime I've gone through, especially the job interview process, because working at some industries that associations serve are definitely more conservative
Right.
than others.
Right.
And some it's related to the industry that they approach. I remember when funny side note, when I came out to my parents, one of the things that my mom said was, well, what if you want to be a sports writer? You're never going to get a job, as a sports writer, because of course there are no gay men in sports.
Yeah,
and
no,
they can't write
none at
about
all.
sports. So, but the funny thing is that I wasn't as into sports then. So I said,
Right.
Mom, I don't really want to write for sports. So that's not necessarily, if you're trying to justify a reason why I should change.
And for that to be, that's really the least problematic thing of all of this is, can you get a job as a sports
Yes,
writer?
as a sports writer.
Right.
And so similarly, eventually I kind of came to that justification where
Right.
remembering especially that previous job that I was in where it was more difficult.
Right.
And thinking, why would I want to go through that added stress
Right.
of working for a place that wouldn't necessarily recognize that I have, different skills and
Right.
talents.
Right.
And that it's all about who I am as a person.
Right.
And that I can bring those kinds of things. So
Right.
that was kind of like an aha moment for me, that no matter how much money I might potentially make.
Right.
But I mean, it is interesting because when I do start a job, a lot of people, they see the wedding ring and they just automatically assume that, people who are married to someone of the opposite sex.
Right.
So every time I go to a new job, I actually have to go through that coming out process,
Right.
all over again. But I've learned how to do that in a way that recognizes, look, I understand that you made an assumption. It's an assumption that a lot of people make. I'm going to correct it, and I'm going to correct it immediately, and I'm
Right.
going to hopefully do it in a way that doesn't make you feel stupid.
Right. Or uncomfortable.
Yeah, or uncomfortable.
Right.
But also at the same time, if someone isn't getting that message, I think in the past I would kind of step back from it, whereas
Right.
now I've found a way to be. I like the image of a dolphin, which is firm
Right.
but flexible
Yes.
in a way,
Okay.
where I'll be firm, but about, no, look, this is kind of who I am, and this is kind of the importance of accepting that, but
Right.
flexible and understanding. But if you don't agree with it,
Right.
of helping, of navigating that, sometimes we're just going to have to agree to disagree.
Right. And so you are a dad, and how has being a dad changed your brand?
Well, I mean, and so, first off, being a parent, and once again, recognizing that it's not for everyone. But yes, it's not for everyone. And, and some people are doing, amazing, great things with their lives that it would definitely be more difficult to do,
Yes.
with the
Yes.
kid. So, but for me, growing up, I had my parents were such amazing, supporting people that really helped me get to where I am today.
Right.
And I wanted to be able to give that to a kid. And also, I just have a lot of nurturing characteristics.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've basically been fathering people, my entire life. And so I
Yes.
thought, why not have my own kid?
Right.
So, but one of the things that having a kid does is this hashtag that the Weather Channel started using around the eclipse was hashtag it's amazing out there.
Right.
Which I love.
Right.
Because it was really about getting reconnected to the wonder
Right.
in the world. And that's one of the things about, having a kid. I remember the first time that my husband and I took him out to a park. I think he was about like maybe 6 or 7 months. And so he could kind of sit and look around.
Right.
And we took him in front of a tree, and he just kept looking up the tree and down the tree and up the tree like, what is this thing?
Right.
This huge, ginormous, amazing thing that is just blowing my mind. And it was just a tree. So one of the ways that having a kid has impacted my brand is getting reconnected with just the wonder in organizations, in people's personality. I am amazed at human behavior, both good and bad.
Right.
And then also, now as he gets older, one of the things with kids is you really have to simplify things.
Yes.
You have to boil it down to its essence. Like, you're
Yes.
dealing with all of these complicated and in some cases scary, difficult things in the world. And how do you deal with that? And so one of the things that we do in my family is we're really big on family mantras.
Okay.
So, it's too much to sometimes explain to a 3-year-old about, this is why it's important to be respectful, and sometimes in situations people might not treat you the best way.
Right.
So we boiled it down to a mantra. And so we always say, Prescott, we are a family that helps. We are a family that is proud of who we are.
Right.
And we are a family that wants to leave the world better.
Right.
So it's very similar to associations in that it's like we have our own family mission statement.
Yes.
So even if sometimes, like, if he's, throwing marbles, at us at the dinner table or something like that, and we'll say, Prescott, are we a family that helps? Yes. Is that very helpful that you're throwing these at us right now? No. And so it's so interesting how when you talk about branding and
Right.
taking a message down to its core, I think that becoming a parent, especially if you're an intentional parent,
Yeah.
if it's something that you're approaching as, this is a gift, but this is something that, while I can be playful, I can't take lightly.
Right.
It's something that can impact your brand. And
Right.
it's coming up with those kinds of mission statements. That is something that has helped me definitely be a more clear, concise communicator, like in my professional life.
Right. And as a gay couple, how was the adoption process for
Sure.
you guys?
Well, so we, on one hand, we were very lucky in that after we got all of the home study and pre-work done, which took us probably about 6 to 7 months, we had decided that we wanted to put our names in for an infant. And nowadays, adoption, it's very similar to online dating. It's an open adoption means that you create a profile, and then there are profiles out there of adoptive families, and so there's a choice.
Okay.
You get to decide, kinds of like the families and maybe the backgrounds or other things that are happening in the family that you would, be interested in, that you could kind of continue to live that truth and
Right.
foster some of those principles.
Right.
And the family gets to decide as well. So
Right.
we were selected by an interracial couple. My husband
Okay.
is white,
Right.
I'm black, and
Right.
we had said that we were interested in raising an interracial child because we wanted to make sure that we were raising a child to be proud of all parts of his or her identity, being
Right.
adopted, being, biracial, and all
Right.
the things that would go into. So once again, standing up, we are a family that is proud of who we are
Right.
and where we come from.
Right.
But we got paired up with a family in Florida.
Okay.
And I remember when we got paired up, I did kind of, knowing the history of the state as being kind of somewhat conservative.
Yes.
I was surprised. I remember I actually said to our lawyer at the time, I said, this kind of seems like a trap because, and at the time, marriage equality had not been granted by the Supreme Court. So my marriage in D.C. Wasn't recognized in Florida. So
Right,
we said,
right.
would that be an issue? And our lawyer said, well, really, in a lot of places, this is a county by county thing.
Sure.
So the judge in the county you would be adopting from has allowed same-sex couples to adopt before, so it shouldn't be a problem. So
Right.
so Prescott's born. We go and meet the birth family. We have a very touching yet bittersweet couple of days where
Right.
they're meeting Prescott, we're meeting Prescott, and we're still Facebook friends with them. We're still in contact with them.
Good.
But we went back to DC, and you basically have to still continue to get social worker visits for 3 months.
Okay.
Just so that way the state can make sure everything's still working out well, because for the
Right.
protection of the child.
Right.
And then after those 3 months, they write a report. It goes before the judge, and basically, as a formality, the judge signs off on it.
Right.
Well, that's not what happened with our judge.
okay.
So it came before our judge. This was probably about like a year and a half before the big court case was going to go before the Supreme Court about marriage equality.
Right.
And this judge, said, you know what? I know that this is getting a lot of play everywhere else, but that is not legal here. It shouldn't be legal, and we're not going to allow someone to come in and circumnavigate the laws of our state. So I will allow one of you to adopt him, And then the other one, you can just try and do a single second parent adoption. Even though we had a marriage certificate, this would have been, if we had been a opposite sex married couple that had been married in, Oklahoma or in Massachusetts, there wouldn't have been any kind of hiccup. And so now all of a sudden, my husband and I were faced with this. Are we going to go through all of this kind of legal framework to create a very complicated will, and so that if something happened to the one of us who was able to adopt, that Prescott wouldn't end up losing both of his adopted parents, and that one of us wouldn't be, just that have this life, this family that I tried to put together erased, or were we going to fight it? So, and obviously there was a happy ending. It turns out that judge was going to be retiring.
Yeah.
So our lawyer said, you know what? Why don't we take a chance? Let's actually kind of cancel all the proceedings, and let's see if the next judge. And I'll say that judge, she did not have any issue with it.
Of course
and she said, you guys have a marriage certificate. We should recognize marriages from other states. So everything was kind of said and done. But, and I think that in today's day and age, one of the lessons that I really get from that is that even when you're living in a climate where you might feel that the politics or the laws are hostile to you, and remembering that, as part of a democracy, the pendulum is always swinging, back and forth. Of course, yes. And so there's always going to be a period of time when, the horse that you backed did not win, or you're not going to necessarily agree with the directions where everything is going.
Right.
Of remembering that there are still people out there that agree with you, and that there are people that do focus on both the goodness in people and the principles that I think that in terms of freedom and equality and things that a lot of us feel that this country stands for, and to not lose sight of that just because sometimes I think, as Martin Luther King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, and it bends towards justice. So sometimes, even though we're not there now, we'll get there. But if you give up, if you take yourself out of the race, then you're never going to get a chance to see it or have an impact to help people get there.
Right. And we were talking a little bit about this off camera before the show started, talking about what happened recently down in Charlottesville and its impact on the country and all the different viewpoints about that. How are you feeling about that, especially someone from the gay community? How are you feeling, not only as a gay man, but an African-American man as well? How did you feel about what was going on down there? Because I had very specific feelings about it being a Jewish woman, of seeing what is happening, and of course our leadership's response to that. What were you feeling about it, and what do you say to your child about what is going on in this country right now?
Well, and it's interesting because when all this stuff was going on, I was actually at a conference, the ASAE conference, which this year was in Toronto, Canada.
Right.
So seeing the juxtaposition of, there were so many things going on in Canada where they were talking specifically about diversity and inclusiveness.
Yes.
The Convention Bureau was using all these imageries of, and one of the interesting things that I learned about Toronto is that 50% of the population of Toronto is from outside of the country of Canada.
Yeah.
So outside of, they have all immigrated in. Yeah. So part of what they were really portraying about their strength is they were showing people of all different religions. They were showing people in burqas. They were showing, they were showing same-sex and opposite-sex couples that were walking with their kids, or that were having public displays of affection in public. So So I'm there in like basically this land of kind of, diversity, inclusion.
Right.
And then, I turn on, the news, and then I'm seeing the protest, the counter protest. And, one of the things that is always striking to me during instances like that is anyone who is a member of a minority or an underrepresented group, it's not just about what people are saying and what they're doing. It's also about what people are not saying.
Right.
And what they're not doing. So, one of the things is like, so whenever someone lists, the laundry list of
Yes.
diversity and inclusion. It's like,
Yeah.
so we accept all religions, all nationalities,
Yes.
all countries, all genders, all sexual orientations, all ability levels, whatever
Right.
it might be. And I get sometimes people may intentionally or unintentionally omit one.
Right.
They might forget to mention gender, or
Right.
they might, forget to mention, ability level.
Right.
And so now for the person in the audience who that represents them, how could they not notice?
Right.
That it's like, okay, so they didn't mention me. Was that intentional, or they didn't stand up for me?
Right.
Was that intentional? And I think that one of the difficult things about things like Charlottesville is that a lot of people start to feel that it's radioactive.
Yes.
So they don't want to touch it.
No.
And and they might fall on either sides of the spectrum. They
Right.
might say, look, there are some things that some people are saying that, I do agree with, but it's going to be unpopular.
Right.
Or it might be there are some things that I think were horrible and I want to stand up against that, but I'm worried about what kind of impact that's going to have on my brand,
Right.
or on, or on the people in my network. But
Right.
I don't remember who it was that said that, a person who stands for nothing
Right.
will fall for anything.
Right.
And so I think that, during these times, one of the things that I always try to do is, while remembering my audience,
Right.
and remembering, kind of who I'm talking to,
Right.
at different times, of recognizing that these things impact me.
Right.
They impact me directly. Sharing that story about how, one judge's bias
Right.
basically almost erased my family.
Right.
Or to say, like, so I understand that while I believe that everyone feels the way that they do for a reason,
Right.
that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to feel that I don't have to feel that what they did was right.
Right.
And
Yes.
and I think that the interesting thing is minority communities, whether that is because of you grew up as part of a religious minority or you're not from this country,
Right.
we're used to having to navigate that,
Right.
because we're used to having to be uncomfortable.
Right.
And I think what's happening now is that, once again, I used to be that nice guy that people would put in the room specifically because it was like, he's going to help everyone feel comfortable.
Right.
But sometimes I now use that to say,
Right.
well, wait a minute, discomfort sometimes leads to change.
Right.
And also sometimes it's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to acknowledge, this makes me feel uncomfortable,
Right.
but I think that this is an important issue, or I recognize this is impacting you
Right.
in a way that I just don't understand, and so I'm uncomfortable bringing it up, but I want to connect with you.
Right.
I want to learn how to share that experience. And I think some of the most influential leaders that have really changed the world are people who are still able to remain firm but flexible
Right.
in their beliefs of, this is my core, this is what I stand for. I'm going to reach across to you, but I'm not going to necessarily bend in terms of letting that denigrate or
Right.
devalue
Right.
who I am.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, super heavy stuff, and we only have a little bit of time left, so I want to pivot really quickly to some more fun and a little more
Sure,
lighthearted stuff
okay,
before we come
right.
off the air. My end segment of you are super on social media. It's a big part of your life, and those of us who are connected with you are fortunate to see what you're sharing in terms of content. But whose content is giving you life right now? Whose content do you think is really changing the game out on the social media spectrum right now?
So for me, and I have to admit, I'm really influenced by the recent celestial events,
Yes.
in terms of the solar eclipse that happened.
Yes.
Actually, was that only just yesterday?
Was it yes? 2 days ago.
It was 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was 2 days ago. So, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson,
Yeah.
the, just kind of the famed both mathematician dealing with also all things celestial and science, because it's interesting to me that he finds ways through science to intersect with both pop culture,
Right.
but then also ways to intersect with some of the issues going on. Like,
Yes.
I know that sometimes we live in an age where science can be controversial,
Right.
Its existence or so on.
Right.
And he had put out this great quote, I think a little bit before one of the marches, where he said, the great thing about science is that it's real whether you believe in it or not.
not.
Yeah,
Yes.
like there are certain things that are going to happen and that are going to be proven.
Right.
And so, and also being alive during a time where like it's cool to be a geek.
Yeah.
To be nerdy. Like, in
Yes.
fact, like if anyone's ever heard the term now blurred.
Yes.
Blurred, which is black nerd. So people like Donald Glover, Childish Gambino,
Yep.
you know, all those. The fact that, you know, when I was growing up, I kind of felt like I had to keep my comic book geeky
Right.
kind of side a little bit hidden.
Right.
Whereas now there's a new comic
Just
book movie
out.
coming out every
Yeah.
minute. You know,
Yeah.
it seems like now my husband actually says, you know, you're going to have to go see Spider-Man by yourself. I'm at my limit. We've gone to 6 this year. I'm not going to see another one.
I don't blame him.
Yeah. No, there's a lot. So seeing that, and
Right.
like, so I follow a lot of Black geeks online,
Right.
and that's something that definitely energizes me.
And what is a social media trend that you just wish would die? Just go away.
All right, so I mean, I know it's never going to go away, but the trend of you know, the 10 people who see this, can you repost to show that now what?
Yes.
Now I will say, you know, it's different. Maybe when like there's an event that happens, like on one hand, like when someone passes away,
Right.
and when people change their avatar images
Yeah.
to show support of that person, or when
Right,
something happens,
right.
I think that's really cool. Like
Yes.
that's seeing that kind of across the flow of social media.
That's
and
how what it was
countries.
intended for.
Yes.
Yes.
But the whole, in some ways, I think that people don't realize when they're posting those things. I do think stuff like, well, I am for cancer awareness, or I
Right.
am for women's rights. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, but now you're kind of shaming, if you will. It's like,
Right.
so those of us who aren't reposting that, does that mean that we're against that? Or is
Right.
it just that maybe I work for an organization where we have a social media policy and I
Right.
need to watch how I'm standing up,
Right.
you know, for certain issues? 'Cause
And
I
there's
have to-
people that get militant about it if you don't repost.
there are people, yes, that will reach out and say, I'm unfriending you. And so I think, you know, there's a way that, once again, we can agree to disagree. I love those posts when someone says, like, I'm having my 5 days of gratitude or whatever, and I'm
Yes.
doing this.
Yep.
And in those cases where, like, maybe you call out a person and then they
Right.
can choose to or not choose. But the public shaming, I think I'm not necessarily a
Yeah,
big fan.
yeah, and especially if you're public shaming over a charity or a cause.
Sure.
That's very counterproductive.
It is,
So
right.
let's not do that.
Yeah, let's not tear people down.
Well, we are literally out of time, and if you could see my page, we had a whole entire section of questions we didn't even get to. There's just so much. Thank you so much. Eloquent as always.
thank you.
Eloquent.
Thank you.
Please join us next week, where my guest will be DJ P Stew. I'm so excited about this. Like, I have automatically prepared myself that I am far less cool than my next guest, and so I'm actually really nervous about it. But tune in; it's going to be really great. Thank you to my sponsors, Co-Create and Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind. Again, if you want to connect with us, you can do so on Twitter at LTP Brand Radio or on Instagram at Let's Talk Personal. See you next week.